众贵宾 ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I know you come from far away to our fair and especially host this forum. 因为在场的很多的贵宾都是远道人朋友，那我们今天也是开始了我们第一场菲律宾当代艺术讲座。那这一次我们跟 Plus Magazine 是菲律宾其实是唯一一间的艺术专业杂志。那我们很高兴可以邀请到这样子的这么熟悉菲律宾当代艺术市场，这么熟悉菲律宾当代艺术发展的单位，来跟我们做一个精彩的演说。有点像是实况报道现在菲律宾政府。时间交给 Ricky， 然后还有 Duffie。
Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Magandang hapon sa inyo lahat at maayong hapon sa inyong tanan. May Cebuano, right? My name is Duffie, Hufana Osental, and I am the editor-in-chief of Plus Magazine.
我的名字是杜飞，我是菲律宾 Lopez 杂志的主编。
If you need guides for my presentation, which is going to be a little long, they're at the back of the seat.
如果你需要我这次演讲的讲义，它就在后方，请大家自行拿取。
So I am here to introduce Philippine contemporary art and the art market in Philippines.
今天为大家介绍菲律宾的当代艺术以及艺术市场。
Next slide, please. To understand a country's art, it is necessary to understand the country itself.
要了解一个国家的艺术，首先我们应该先了解它的历史。
The Philippines should be understood in terms of three characteristics. The first is the geography, its history, and of course the demographics.
今天会从三个角度来介绍菲律宾。第一个是地理，第二个是历史，第三个是人口的组成。
The Philippines is an archipelago island in Southeast Asia. It has 7,100 islands and three big island groupings: Luzon, which is over there, Visayas, over there, and Mindanao.
菲律宾它位在东南亚，它总共有7100个岛屿，总共有3个大岛。第一个是位在北方的吕宋岛，第二个是位在中间的维萨亚斯岛，第三个是明达纳尔岛。
Coincidentally, it is our flag has 3 stars. Those are the three groups.
我们会看到我们国旗上有3颗星星，这3颗星星也分别象征这3个主要的岛屿。
Yeah, so 1, 2, 3 stars. In terms of major cities, there's of course the capital of Manila, Cebu, Iloilo, and Davao, where our president is from.
4个主要的城市主要有马尼拉、宿务、伊洛、大马。
The boundaries of the Philippines were artificially grown by Spanish colonizers. So it's necessary sometimes, because the Philippines is an artificial country, to understand the history.
菲律宾的地理位置其实是受到殖民国家主动的划分而造成的。
Since the Philippines is an artificial country drawn up by colonizers, most of the arts and cultural movements in the country has been driven by a search for identity.
因此，我们刚刚提到我们的地理位置的划分，主要是受到别人所规划的。因此，我们的国家里面常常会出现很多的文化以及社会的运动，主要目的是要追求国家的自我认同。
Of course, it's also a lot of Philippine history and Philippine character is dependent on our own search for sovereign independence and political identity.
除了追求我们自我认同之外，我们也追求政治上的独立。
And of course, our own relationships with our neighbors Taiwan included, but also to the south, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the rest of Southeast Asia, and to across the sea, Vietnam, and of course, China is important and has been important throughout our history.
和周边国家的关系在我们的历史上也是很重要的，包括台湾在内，有中国、马来西亚、印尼等等国家。
This is a timeline, if you can read it. This is a timeline of Philippine history that I stole from Wikipedia.
这是我们国家历史过程的时间表，如果大家可以看得仔细的话。
Yeah, but don't tell them I stole it. As you can see, there is a pre-colonial past, there is also a colonial past, and there is the modern period at the bottom.
大家可以看到，在受到殖民之前，我们有不同的时代，有新石器时代，还有殖民之前的时代。
What is interesting about the Philippines, though, is that during the colonial past, you can see many different independence movements.
在受到殖民之前，我们可以看到，红色后面灰色的那个区域，我们的国家里面有许多不同的王国。
So that only goes to show how the Philippines has long searched for its own identity and this has expressed itself in terms of a political independence.
这也说明了对于为什么自我认同对我们的国家这么的重要，也说明了为什么我们的国家特别的重视政治的运动。
This is best characterized by the name of the Philippines itself.
这个人物他对于菲律宾非常的重要。
This is Philip II, the Philippine of Spain. He is a Habsburg monarch, and the Philippines was named after him.
他是西班牙的一任君主，菲律宾这个名字就是用他的名字菲利普2世来命名的。
And in many ways, all Filipinos are named after him.
其实有很多菲律宾人也是用菲利普这个名字命名。
This is a nice painting, by the way, by the artist Hufana.
从艺术的角度来看，这幅画也画得很好。
But it only goes to show how the Philippines, as a concept, as a nation, is very artificial and has been, for the longest time, been drawn out by outsiders.
因此也可以看到，在菲律宾的历史当中，殖民国的影响非常重要。
So if you analyze Philippine culture, it has 4 characteristics. Right? It is Austronesian.
要了解菲律宾的文化，我们从4个层面来看。第一个是南岛语族的影响。
It is Catholic.
天主教。
It is regional.
不同的地区。
And it is diasporic, meaning we go out of the country. We have a tradition of going out of the country.
还有前往海外工作的菲律宾人。
So in terms of Austronesian, there are lots of myths and folklores that we share with the greater Austronesian migration. So that we share with Indonesia, for instance, and Malaysia, and even as far as Polynesia.
在菲律宾的历史最早之前，是由从中国南方的南岛语族移民到菲律宾的。
Perhaps I think the most prominent example of how separate we are from the rest of Asia is our Catholic nature.
可以看到菲律宾另外一个特别重要的特色是天主教的特色。
Catholics being very linear, and also they have a strong sense of guilt.
天主教的
like
信，
Vicky and I.
天主教的信仰特别重视不要犯罪。可以从我跟另外一位长者也可以看到这个特质，非常的正直。
More humor. And our mythologies and our legends is a merging of Austronesian beliefs and the pantheon of Catholic saints.
南岛语族还有天主教，他们原始的信仰，例如神话传说、天主教的神话故事，都深深影响着菲律宾。
We are regional in a sense that the nature of our geography as an archipelago means it's difficult for certain regions to communicate with each other.
作为一个群岛，菲律宾的各个岛屿之间彼此的连结，其实并不是非常的直接。
And even islands as very near to each other as say Bohol and Cebu often exist in isolation.
即使非常近，像是邻居般的岛屿，常常也都不太懂彼此的各个资讯。
And of course, it's diasporic because in recent years, the Philippines and Filipinos has been exporting a lot of people in terms of labor, but also in terms of artists and residencies and similar endeavors.
近年来也有大量的菲律宾人往海外工作或者是移民。
So the totality of this shows is reflected in our identity, and identity is the prime mover of a nation's art and art scene.
因此，这4个特质塑造了我们菲律宾的自我认同，而对于自我认同的这个追求，它也显现在我们艺术表现上。
Next slide, please. These are images of the 16th century boxer codex.
这张画是16世纪 Boxer Codex 所画的。
This was drawn up by Spanish conquerors at the time of the first Spanish conquest in the late 16th century.
这是在16世纪晚期，西班牙人以殖民国的角度来绘画他们所看到的菲律宾人。
These are ancient Filipinos, meaning this is what they dress like and what they look like.
这幅画的主题就是绘画他们眼中菲律宾人的形象以及穿着。
As you can, I showed this slide to sort of illustrate the fact that it's outsiders who were the ones that perceived us first and defined what it meant to be Filipino.
我放这张图的目的，一部分也是要说明菲律宾最早的艺术也是从外来者的角度来塑造的。
This spills over to our visual identity and how we perceive art and how we perceive the world around us.
这也影响了我们是如何看待艺术，以及当时的自我认同是如何。
So from the very beginning, Philippine artists were asking themselves questions such as, what is a Filipino, and how should one be a Filipino within the Philippines?
所以，因此菲律宾的艺术家时常问自己一个问题：菲律宾人是什么？
And what does it mean to live and work in the Philippines as an artist?
菲律宾是什么样的国家？还有在菲律宾创作、在菲律宾生活意味着是什么？
Next, please. When the Spanish strengthened their presence in the Philippines, the predominant visual identity became ecclesiastical. It became church art.
在菲律宾一个非常主流的视觉图像就是天主教的图像。
This is an image of the Black Nazarene in the Basilica of a church, the church in Quiapo.
这是在艾奎波教堂的一座雕像。这个雕像的主题是黑拿撒勒人。
It is venerated every January. It's venerated every January where you take it out in a procession.
每年1月都会有大型的敬拜活动。
January 29.
1月29。
January 9. January 9. I'm a bad Catholic.
我可能不是一个很优秀的天主教徒。
Over 1 million people attend these events, or hundreds of thousands.
每年大约会有几十万甚至到100万的人会参加这场大型的盛会。
The idea that this image is an old image that has existed for hundreds of years and that the procession has continued shows how powerfully ingrained visual identity is with Philippine identity.
这个图像已经存在了大概数百年，那也让我们知道宗教的艺术是如何强烈的影响菲律宾的艺术。
Next. Later on, we started to form our own identity and concept of visual identity.
接下来我们从另外一个角度来理解菲律宾的视觉艺术。
These are images from Damian Domingo, who established the first art studio in Tondo in Manila, an art academy in 1821.
这是 Domingo 的作品，他在西元1821年创立了菲律宾第一所美术学校。
As you can see, there is a definite Western aesthetic that he uses, and of course the costumes are also very Western.
我们可以看到画面的风格以及穿着是典型的西洋美学。
But there is also a very, I'd like to say something characteristically Filipino about not just the facial features, but also the details in the costume.
但是脸部的特色以及其他的细节，还是可以看到菲律宾的特色。
And this began, I suppose, the academy period in Philippine art history.
这段时间可以算是菲律宾学院美术的时期。
Next slide, please. We speak with the achievements of Felix Resurrection Hidalgo and, of course, Juan Luna in the late 19th century.
这件作品可以看到19世纪 Hidalgo 和 Luna 两位艺术家的作品。
These two images are Juan Luna paintings. One is at the Lopez Museum where Ricky works, and the other is the famous Spolarium at the National Museum in Manila.
左边的这件作品是 Luna 的作品，那这件作品在 Ricky 工作的洛佩兹美术馆收藏。那右边的这件作品叫斗兽场外，中文翻译为斗兽场外，它在菲律宾的国家美术馆收藏。
The Western tradition is obvious in that they both adhere to what is known as the hierarchy of genres.
我们可以看到西洋的影响在初期的菲律宾，它算是一个非常重要的指标。
The left one being an allegorical painting, and the right being a historical reimagining.
他们都描述了当时的生活和历史的情景。
So it's a very European approach, but with Filipino themes in the sense that this is an allegory of Spain leading the Philippines, the smaller one being the Philippines, and on the right, what's that? It's like how the Philippines is being, sort of stolen from by the Spanish.
这两张作品都是用欧洲的技法来描绘菲律宾的主题。那右边的这件作品，如果大家仔细看，可以看到这个它其实是在描述殖民国家如何剥削菲律宾，作为一个他们的殖民地。
Next slide, please. When the 19th century turned into the 20th century, there are other artists, but two artists really stood out in defining what is thought of as the Philippine aesthetic. Guillermo Tolentino and Fernando Omar Solo.
20世纪出现了菲律宾典型的美学，左边是 Tolentino 的雕像，右边是 Omar Solo 的绘画。
So after this period, most artists their practices revolved around reacting towards these two artists and their aesthetic.
在这两位大师的时期过后，许多艺术家开始回应，甚至是挑战这类型的美学。
On the left side is what is called the monumento. It is a monument to the Katipunan and particularly Andres Bonifacio, its leader and founder.
左边的雕像的主题是纪念菲律宾一个独立运动的英雄人物。
It's an example of how visual identities, particularly in the Philippines, is used to solidify a political identity.
这也说明了菲律宾的艺术其实有部分时间是服务于政治用途。
On the right side is Fernando Omar Solo's typical painting of a farm scene in an idyllic farm scene.
右边 Omar Solo 的作品显现出一个理想的农村情怀。
Next slide, please. This is the immediate movement after, which is called the modernist movement. So on the left is a painting by Vicente Manansala, and the right is a painting of Angkyo.
这边的作品是马纳萨拉跟 Tuco 两位艺术家的作品，他们的作品的风格是当时20世纪现代主义的风格。
So if you compare the two periods, the first period everyone is very happy or very heroic and very courageous. The next generation of artists reacted against that and said, hey, it's not always like this.
和上一个世纪比较起来，上一个世纪那种英雄式、有纪念式的美学，和现在这样的风格做对比，可以看出，像当时的艺术家是想要挑战艺术，它有其他的表现方式。
There's also a transition from what is considered mimetically beautiful to something that is more abstracted in nature.
这也是典型美学和抽象美学的对比。
This would sort of reveal itself later on in the next period. Next slide, please. When artists started to both either experiment more on media
个时期的艺术家做了更多媒材上面的实验，
or to react more to social concerns.
比较多回应了社会的议题以及关怀。
On the left is a painting of Lee Aguinaldo by artist Lee Aguinaldo done in the 70s.
这边的艺术家是 Diagonal，
And on the right is a painting by Elmore Boylongan.
右边是另一位艺术家的作品。
Next slide, please. Today's art scene is a refinement of the history that exists in the Philippines.
菲律宾艺术的现况其实是历史浓缩后的一种缩影。
So if you're an artist, typically you would begin with an art education.
如果你是艺术家，你需要先接受艺术教育。
That then later on you would validate yourself through institutions in terms of museums, awards, and participation, residencies.
之后你会需要一些机构的认证，例如美术馆或者是得美术馆的奖项。
You would sell the galleries, and your works would be exhibited in auction houses. Sold in auction houses, exhibited in galleries, and sold in art fairs such as these.
之后你会需要市场的力量，例如画廊、拍卖行、艺术博览会。
Of course, media in the Philippines would cover it. We're very proud, and I'm particularly very proud of the fact that Philippine media is very, very free, and that there is no real attempt to censor anything.
接下来是媒体，我非常的骄傲，菲律宾的媒体其实很自由，可以播报各式各样的主题。
And lastly, it also responds to new technologies and new ways to disseminate information such as Facebook, social media, and new media such as video and video editing.
菲律宾的艺术也会受到新兴的科技影响，例如新媒体、脸书、Facebook， 或者是录像艺术。
So Metro Manila, for better or worse, and this is a very big debate in the Philippines, right? But the reality of Metro Manila is as the center hub. It's where the market exists. It's where most of the universities are located. It's where most of the galleries are located. And it's where most of the museums and institutions are located.
马尼拉是菲律宾艺术的中心，除了拥有最多的大学、画廊、美术馆之外，它也是整个媒体的重心。
There are also other centers of art production in the Philippines, the main ones being Cebu, of course, Baguio, Iloilo, Bacolod, they're all over there.
在其他的城市也有艺术的中心、制造的中心，例如宿务、巴科洛德、伊洛和碧瑶。
There's a concept in art theory called the Imperial Center, and the Philippines sort of exhibits this idea because while it would be great if all these other production centers sort of rise as institutional hubs of their own, this is the reality of the situation right now. Very similar to late 19th century Europe, where Paris and Vienna were the centers of art.
菲律宾这些城市的情况，其实和19世纪早期的法国或者是维也纳的情况类似。他们这四个我们刚刚提到的城市，他们虽然是艺术的中心，但是菲律宾最重要的艺术重镇仍然是马尼拉。
By the way, I hope I got the arrows right. The arrows right. I could be pointing to Cebu, but it's like Bohol. Oh, yeah, there. No need to translate them. Next, please. Let's start with Philippine art education because the artists in the Philippines start with art. If you decide that you want to be an artist and you like drawing, etc., usually you would start pursuing an education in the arts.
接下来为各位介绍菲律宾的艺术教育。首先，第一个是工作室的艺术教育。
Art education in the Philippines is studio-based, meaning you conduct residencies in studios. It's also the Western tradition, meaning at the end of it there is nominally a thesis that is exhibited. And you graduate with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. This is a very typical path. I'm not saying that all artists follow this path, but this is a very typical path in the artist world.
工作室形
生态的艺术教育其实是遗传自西方的传统。那接受教育过后，通常艺术家会取得了艺术学士的学位。那这是普遍的取得艺术教育的一个过程。
The Bachelor of Fine Arts degree is actually a very, not just Western, it's very US system.
艺术学士这个学位不只是有西方的风味，其实它偏向是美国式的学制。
And it's a 4-year degree. Science.
总共是4年制。
These are some examples of universities in the Philippines. The College of Fine Arts, of course, at the University of the Philippines in Diliman. The University of San Tomas College of Fine Arts and Architecture now. They keep changing the name, but it's the College of Fine Arts and Architecture now. Far Eastern University Institute of Art.
接下来这4间是菲律宾常见重要的美术学院，有菲律宾大学美术学院、圣托马斯大学美术与设计学院、远东大学艺术与建筑学院。
And of course, De La Salle College of St. Benil, they have new programs that go beyond the Bachelor of Fine Arts, and they have multimedia arts, they have photography, etc.
此外，还有重要的德拉萨大学圣百尼德学院，他们提供非传统的视觉艺术的课程，例如多媒体艺术课程以及摄影。
A special note that is the Philippine High School of the Arts. It's a secondary school that's located to the north of Manila. To the south of Manila in a mountain.
在马尼拉南部的山上，还有另一间艺术的中等学校，它是艺术高中。
It's a government school and all students are scholars of the government.
它是一所公立的学校。
In terms of government institutions, there are 2 main ones that regulate and sort of promote art in the Philippines. The first is the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or the NCCA.
2间菲律宾最有名的政府艺术机构是国家文化与艺术委员会。
And the Cultural Center of the Philippines.
另外一间是菲律宾文化中心
which also administers the 13 Artist Award for young artists every 2 years.
菲律宾文化中心每年会举办13大杰出年轻艺术家奖。
Both institutions have a selection committee that picks candidates for what is known as the National Artist of the Philippines Award.
这2个机构会合办一个国家艺术家奖。
Ultimately, the selection is determined by the President of the Philippines.
这2个机构会先列出得奖名单，并且让总统做最后的选拔。
By that virtue, sometimes it can be very heavily politicized.
但有的时候，这个奖项其实带有浓厚的政治意味。
But at the same time, being awarded the National Artist is a great honor. That's usually accorded to senior artists.
因为这个奖项，它对于资深的艺术家来说是莫大的奖项。
Among the benefits that the National Artist gets is a monthly stipend and free healthcare for life.
它的奖项是终身的艺术津贴以及免费的医疗补助。
It is determined every 3 years.
每3年会选拔出国家艺术家。
Usually, national artists, their works, their prices are a little higher if you're interested in them.
那这个奖项非常的丰厚。
Next, please. That's the Cultural Center of the Philippines.
这是菲律宾文化中心。
Or as Ricky calls it, a big toilet.
我们有时候会开玩笑说，这是一个很大间的厕所。
By the way, that's the beautiful Manila Bay on the right side.
但后方有很漂亮的马尼拉海滩。
Next, please. There's also, of course, the National Museum.
这是菲律宾国家美术馆。
Which houses all our national art treasures, including the Spolarium.
它收藏了菲律宾最重要的国宝级艺术品，其中有刚刚说到的斗兽场外。
The assassination of Governor General Bustamante.
暗杀总督 Bustamante 这幅画。
Manunggul jar.
还有考古文物陶棺。
The Laguna Copper Plate. Here. If just a break so that you don't get too bored about this, right? This is the Laguna Copper Plate.
这是拉古纳铜板。
And in it is the ancient writing of the Philippines.
它上面有古老的菲律宾文字。
And if you look at all the logos that you see from the CCP and the NCCA, that's the writing.
如果我们仔细观察这些字母，我们会发现刚刚提到两大机构，他们的 logo 都是用这些文字来做发想。
Sometimes even Filipinos forget that we have our own script.
但这些文字有时候菲律宾人自己也不太认识。
Of course, there are university spaces. One, of course, is Ateneo Art Gallery,
大学艺术空间也是很重要的，例如这间雅典耀画廊，
which organizes the Ateneo Art Awards as an exhibit award, an award for exhibits.
这间画廊它每年会主办雅典耀艺术奖。
And the Vargas Museum of the University of the Philippines.
还有凡德赛斯美术馆，大学美术馆。
Also, this is a new space called the Museum of Contemporary Art and Design at the College of St. Benil.
另外，这也是一个新兴的大学美术空间。
And its director and curator is the next curator of the Philippine Pavilion in the Venice Biennale.
这间当代艺术与设计美术馆的策展人也将是下一届威尼斯双年展菲律宾馆的策展人。
Next, okay, we're talking about the Philippine art market now.
接下来进入菲律宾的艺术市场。
And essentially, it starts with collectors, like any other art market.
像是其他艺术市场一样，收藏家都扮演非常重要的角色。
We have artisan spaces and commercial galleries.
有艺术家自营的空间以及商业画廊。
Next is auction houses
拍卖行
and art fairs.
以及艺术博览会。
It's a symbiotic relationship actually between all these institutions and collectors.
刚刚提到的这些机构，他们彼此是互利共生的关系。
And the institutions exist as platforms for exhibition and unloading art.
他们彼此分别是个别的展示的空间。
There are over 5 dozen galleries in the Philippines. I think around, from my count, 74 or 70.
菲律宾总共大约有60间画廊，但我刚刚一算，大概是74间。
There's salon-style exhibitions.
沙龙形式的展览空间。
There are standalone galleries with their own venue spaces, and also galleries that exist in shopping malls.
独立空间的画廊，或者是位在商场内部的画廊。
And usually, exhibitions are 2 week during a 2-week period, and they are of curated works.
画廊的展览一般的时间是2个礼拜。
So my friend Ricky gets work. Okay, no translation. And the unloading methods, either consignment or outright sales.
艺廊的经营形式有买断以及寄卖，藏家寄卖。
Okay, next please. There are 2 auction houses. One is Leon and one is Salcedo Auction.
菲律宾最重要的2大拍卖行是萨尔塞斯拍卖行以及莱昂画廊。
Okay, and I think the best way to really analyze the art market and how much is being spent in the Philippines is analyzing a particular event.
接下来我们从销售的数字来看菲律宾市场的强度。
And these are the sales of the September auction of Leon Gallery, which happened in mid-September.
今年9月里昂画廊的拍卖结果达到了台币的1.4860万。
Each auction house has 1 quarterly auction.
每一个拍卖行它1年有4场拍卖活动。
So there are 8 auctions in a year.
总共有
Mostly local collectors and local artists.
除了本地艺术家的参与，也有国际艺术家的作品。
In this particular auction, sales were made it to 231 million pesos, or 148,600,000 new Taiwan dollars.
左下角这是菲律宾国家级的艺术家 Bangkok 的作品，它的销售达到了1300万元左右。
So you can imagine the kind of money that circulates within the Philippine market.
可以用这个数字来想象菲律宾市场的强度。
Top sellers include national artist Bangkok, which had a final price of 13,528,000 plus.
另外一件最高价的作品达到了1900多万元台币。
And International artist Carlos Botong Francisco with a final price of 19,500,000 Taiwan dollars.
这些数字都在画面上。
So there, and of course there are two fairs in the Philippines, the Art Fair Philippines in February and Manila Art in October.
接下来菲律宾还有两大最重要的艺术博览会，有 Art Fair Philippines 菲律宾艺术博览会以及马尼拉艺术博览会。
The first one is a privately run fair, and the second receives a stipend from the government.
菲律宾艺术博览会是私营的，是公司营运的。那马尼拉艺术博览会是国家政府营运的。
If you talk to me privately later, I will tell you which is the better fair.
如果你私下问我，我会告诉大家哪一个艺术博览会比较好。
If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm here.
我的部分到这里，请问大家有任何问题吗？
Any questions?
So which is the better thing?
I will tell you later. Yes.
其实我用那个中文问好了，你翻译。那个我们在国际艺术市场上经常可以看到那个菲律宾的比较属于当代艺术的，像费南度索维尔啊，或者马尼拉克鲁兹啊，或者温图纳罗纳的温图纳，那现在他们在菲律宾的那个艺术市场是不是以当代艺术为主？像早期的，像他们前辈画家的那具象艺术是比较没有接受度比较低，还是怎么样？
Question seems very hard. I had a very interesting talk with my friend, Mr. Ricky, last night. I had a talk with Mr. Ricky about that last night, and we asked ourselves, if we were very, very wealthy, what would we rather buy, and what artist would we buy?
这个问题非常有趣。昨天我就和我身旁的 Ricky 谈过，如果我今天是非常有钱的人，我会选择购买哪一类的艺术品
And Ricky said Amor Solo
？Ricky 说 Amor Solo， 我们刚刚看到那位具象的艺术家。
because it's easier to unload.
他说因为接下来将来脱手会比较容易。
If you ask me the strongest sector of the art market that sells really is maybe the pre-modern and modernist period.
如果你问我在菲律宾的艺术在市场上最常见的是哪一类，我会说是现代艺术或者是早期的现代艺术。
And we're talking about modernists like Carlos Francisco, you saw that. Who else? Ang Kyukok, Anita Magsaysay, Ho, and those. And if you think about it, Ben Cab is a late modernist as well. So Benedict Cabrera, those are the ones that really sell higher.
刚刚我们在画面上看到，其中有位是 Kyukok 和其他的艺术家，他们是属于现代主义晚期的艺术家，他们的作品在市场上就已经达到非常高的销售额。
The question here is consistency.
他认为这个我们在谈论市场的价值，最重要的是它是否能够持久。
It's very true that Ronald Ventura sells high, and other contemporary artists such as maybe Jose, John Santos, sell very high as well.
那我们当然也有一些特别显著的例子，当代艺术也是
John Santos.
John Santos， 当代艺术的 John Santos， 他的作品的价格现在在市场上也是价格是非常的高。
Or Geraldine Javier is also consistently it sells high.
或者是 Geraldine Javier， 他的作品价格也很高。
But in terms of consistency, you can't go wrong with anything from the modernist period, like the aforementioned artists Ang Kyukok, Anita Magsaysay,
但如果是要长久的经营，我会说目前是现代艺术它比较能够长久的经营，在价格上来看。
If you go earlier than that, you cannot go wrong with an Amor Solo at all.
但我们刚刚看到那个 Amor Solo， 他的作品可能就没办法能够持长久的有如此高的销售成绩。
But anything before that, like One Luna, in many ways is also heavily regulated. By the government has regulations on what you can sell of that period in the 19th century.
但是像是我们刚刚看到的国宝级的艺术家 Luna， 国家级的美术馆收藏的这件作品，国家他们其实会严格的控管这些国宝级艺术家作品的销售。
I will say this. I think that contemporary art sells higher outside the Philippines because it's easier to bring it out of the Philippines legally.
我发现菲律宾的当代艺术其实在菲律宾的国外卖的比较好，因为比较容易在国外销售。
You cannot easily bring a national artist outside of the Philippines. There are laws against that.
那我们的法律其实也严格禁止销售国宝级艺术家的作品，尤其是销售到海外。
So that's why it might be easier. That's why and abroad the prices are always tend to be higher.
另外，菲律宾艺术家作品的价格在海外的确可以销售到比较高的金额。好问题。
那个菲律宾的人口大概有1亿多的人口嘛，那他们本身的艺术市场，就是说一般的艺术收藏家的买气状况如何？就是说他本身国内的艺术家、艺术收藏的那个人口如何？
He knew that in Philippines there are about 100 million people, and he's wondering how about the collector ecology and how many collectors in Philippines.
Collectors in the Philippines tend to keep a low profile.
比例其实比较低。
So it's very difficult to ascertain how many collectors there are.
而且比较难去能够抓到准确的藏家的数字。
There are collectors also on the low end of the scale, newer ones.
像新进的藏家也数目也很少。
And there are the collectors that really collect a lot of art, have a lot of money to collect art.
少数的藏家，他们通常都是消费非常高的金额。
By my estimate, it's hard to say. I don't think I'm at liberty to say exactly how many collectors there are.
这个问题比较难回答，因为他不太清楚这些藏家的数量。
But they don't stop collecting, so that they still continue to buy art, no matter what the times are.
但是他们不论在各个时代，他们仍然持续的买进艺术品。谢谢你。
Any more questions before we go over to Mr. Ricky Francisco?
如果没有问题的话，我们要进入第二个阶段，让策展人 Ricky 来为我们介绍菲律宾的艺术。
Thanks. Good afternoon.
大家午安。
I was asked to talk about contemporary Philippine art.
我的主题是菲律宾的当代艺术。
Sometimes when we sleep, we don't know when we sleep. We only know that we slept when we are awake.
有的时候我们在睡觉的时候，并不知道我们在睡觉，直到我们醒来才会发现我们刚刚在睡觉。
With contemporary art, it is hard to describe because it is still happening.
像当代艺术的，我们比较难去分析一些确切的情况，因为它正在发生。
So my approach is to show to you trends in approaches and themes.
所以我的方法是向大家分享菲律宾当代艺术的趋势、主题以及方法。
How Philippine artists use images
菲律宾的艺术家是如何使用图像，
and put their own unique twist into it.
并且添加他们个人独特的语汇。
First slide, please. It was in 2012 when Ronald Ventura had this 1 million painting sold at an auction.
在2012年， Ventura 温杜拿这位艺术家，他的作品以美金110万落选。
Next slide, please. The Art Economist called it one of the 11 top world auctions at that time.
当年经济学者也整理出全世界11件最令人惊艳的作品，温杜拉的作品就在其中。
In 2012, Guggenheim Foundation mounted an exhibition on Southeast Asian art.
当年古根汉基金会，它也展出了以东南亚艺术为主题的展览。
A lot of Filipino artists were there.
许多菲律宾的艺术作品也在其中。
And the Filipino curator was made adjunct curator.
菲律宾的策展人也在其中。
At that same year, Rodel Tapaya won a major award in the Singapore Art Museum.
当年菲律宾的艺术家塔帕亚也赢得了新加坡美术馆的奖项。
He also bested artists from Southeast Asia and Middle East Asia.
他的作品也在东南亚和中东地区广受欢迎。
But prior to that, Filipino art was mostly known from artists living abroad, like David Medalla or Manuel Ocampo.
在刚刚看到这股热潮之前，西方人认识的菲律宾艺术，主要是长期住在国外的艺术家，例如 Medalla 和 Ocampo。
Before them, not much attention was given to Philippine art, and the biggest attention given to it was more than 100 years ago with this painting, the Spolarium.
在刚刚这股热潮之前，其实菲律宾的艺术并不受国际瞩目。主要是菲律宾像是这件作品100年前的作品比较受到国际的注目。
This painting won a gold prize in Madrid 1884.
这件作品在西元1884年赢得了金奖。
It bested paintings from even Spanish nationals themselves.
这件作品也受到了西班牙政府的奖励鼓励。
Our previous speaker, Duffie, gave us a great introduction to Philippine art history.
刚刚我们的讲者 Duffie 已经为我们很精彩的介绍了菲律宾的艺术。
I want to show how images are borrowed and then recycled in contemporary Philippine art.
接下来我想要用图像的方式来向大家介绍菲律宾的艺术。
When the Philippines was colonized in the 16th century, Western art was not known yet in that sense.
当16世纪西班牙殖民菲律宾的时候，西方艺术这个概念还没有进入到菲律宾。
Prior to colonization, there were many Austronesian peoples. Next slide, please. Of different cultures.
在受到西班牙殖民之前，菲律宾主要是南岛语族的文化和其他多元的文化。
Many of them resisted colonization up to the 20th century.
接下来比较受到注目的是20世纪的绘画。
A lot of their art was largely utilitarian. Stop. Sorry, go back please. A lot of their art was largely utilitarian. They had to have use.
在受殖民之前的艺术的风格，主要是实用的主义。
In Duffie's presentation, he showed us the Boxer Codex.
在 Duffie 刚刚的演讲，他提到了 Boxer Codex。
We have gold bracelets in our museums.
这边提到，在我们的美术馆有用金做成的手镯
that show the Boxer Codex is very accurate.
这显示了 Boxer Codex 当时所用殖民者的眼光所描述的菲律宾的文物是非常准确的。
Aside from utilitarian art, next slide please. Filipinos of that time had a lot of religious art with Indian influence.
从这些作品我们会看到，菲律宾的艺术也受到了印度以及其他传统宗教信仰的影响。
Next slide please. So they resisted colonialization until the 20th century.
所以直到20世纪是菲律宾独立之前，其实菲律宾经历了数百年的殖民统治。
But eventually became colonized under American rule.
到20世纪之前，仍然又受到了美国的殖民。
Okay, next slide please. there. Sorry about that. So, but largely, the most definitive influence into our culture is by the Spanish.
在那之前，其实菲律宾主要的生活文化仍然是受到了西班牙文化的影响。
Our language, our food, our art, our religion
语言、食物、艺术、信仰
are influenced by it.
都受到了西班牙的影响。
It is because Spanish introduced us to art as we know it.
我们的艺术最早就是受到西班牙的影响。
And early art consisted of religious art.
早期的艺术也是以宗教的性质为主。
Printmaking, painting, carving were all for religious purposes.
印刷、绘画、雕刻等创作都是服务宗教这个目的。
There were no patrons of art except the church and the state.
除了教会这类的宗教场合之外，其实艺术主要不为了一般大众服务。
It was in 1821 that a growing merchant class became patron to art.
18世纪晚期，商人阶级崛起，他们成为艺术的主要赞助者。
The school of Damian Domingo catered to teaching, painting, and carving to various artists.
刚刚提到的 Domingo 创办的美术学院，主要教导的就是绘画、雕刻等等。
All of them catered to the growing middle class who had wealth.
Domingo 他所教导的这些科目，主要就是为了服务这些崛起的商人阶级。
Since 1821 to 1884, only 6 decades. Sorry about that. Only 6 decades after painting was introduced formally, Filipinos became really good at it.
1821年到1884年这短短60年的时间，菲律宾人的艺术就达到了最高的标准。
Even being able to win the gold medal in Madrid.
像这件作品就在马德里得到了金牌奖。
Next slide, please. Decades later, in the 20th century, Amorsolo, Fabian de la Rosa, and a lot of other painters focused on the life of farmers and rural folk.
20世纪初期，艺术家de la Rosa 和 Amorsolo 他们的作品就专注于农村的理想生活以及乡村色彩。
However, being exposed to another set of colonizers like the Americans, art changed again.
到了到了美国殖民菲律宾的时候，菲律宾的艺术风格再次的转变。
This one, 1928, by Victoria Edades, called The Builders.
这件作品是 Ada 在1928年所作，她的作品名称是 The Builders。
Shows a different value to art.
它展现了艺术力量另一种价值。
Next slide, please. World War II and patronage by elites enabled this new art to become accepted.
之后开始了2次大战，许多在欧美留学过的精英分子开始支持这一类的艺术创作。
Local artists were educated in America and in Europe and brought with them new ideas.
刚刚提到这些本地精英，通常是在欧美留学回来，并且带回来当时最流行的艺术思想。
Art was no longer about the beautiful,
艺术也不仅仅是为了美而已，
but also about ideas.
它也关于思想。
This is a picture of David Medalla,
这件作品是 Magdala 的作品，
and at the right is a picture of one of his artworks.
这是他作品的图片。
It shows a machine blowing bubbles. And the,
这件作品里面安装了一个机器，它会不断的生出泡沫。
and the bubbles create an ever-changing sculpture.
这个泡沫本身的形状不断的转变，它创造出了一个变化万千的雕塑。
Next slide, please. So, this is where we are. From the different changes of ideas, we look into the contemporary.
所以，通过不同思想的转变，我们来到了当代的这个时代。
Next slide, please. There's an appropriation of indigenous images.
开始出现了挪用本土文化的图像。
Okay, this is by Ronald Ventura again, since we know him. His work is characterized by realistic figuration.
这是我们刚刚提到艺术家Ventura温杜拉的作品，他特别精通写实的技巧。
But his work shows the various influences.
他的作品展现了各个文化的影响。
Pop art mixes with local scenes.
流行文化和本土图像。
To show identity in a global time.
展现在全球文化里面的本土意识。
However, time and time again, he would go back to indigenous images.
经历一段创作的时间，温杜拉他也回到了菲律宾传统神话这个主题。
Next slide, please. He would use indigenous images and juxtapose it with religious and pop images.
他将传统神话故事和流行图像融合。
Simultaneously talking about the mythic, the ordinary, the violent, the global.
同时探索着神话、流行和全球化这些主题。
By fusing different images together, it creates questions on identity.
他使用拼接的方式来探讨认同这个主题。
Next slide, please. This is the same rice deity, but with the Pinocchio nose.
这件雕塑的主题是菲律宾原住民的神明。
Next slide, please. If you look back from more than a century ago, you would see the rice deity in its original context, and then compare it with how Ronald Ventura used it.
在1个世纪之前，我们可以看到画面中心的这位神明，他是菲律宾原住民的米神，米的神明。我们可以看到这样子的一个冲突的做法在作品里面。
This layering of history against the present creates questions.
像这样如此把传统和现代的主题结合在一起，会创造出许多回应社会议题的议题。
Next slide, please. For example, we have Gaston Damat, who is a carver from the Ifugao people.
艺术家高马，他有原住民的血统，他的族群的名字叫伊富高。
He lives in Paris now.
他现在住在法国。
And uses indigenous images, but in a different context.
他使用传统原住民的图像，但是是在使用不同的主题呈现。
Thereby putting his self-identity in the global context.
试图挑战全球化底下的本土意识。
Next slide, please. Next slide. He uses local tools. For example, these are harvesting knives to harvest rice.
他使用原住民的工具，这个图片里面是割稻米用的小刀。
He repurposes that into a sculpture.
他把原住民的用具重新创造为当代艺术品。
Their habit of chewing betel nut.
伊富高另外一个习俗是使用嚼完槟榔汁之后得到的这个颜料。
He uses the spit to create a painting.
这是伊富高的习俗。
Or he uses, for example, he uses the rice mortar and pestle to become a sculpture.
他也会使用这种去除米壳的工具作为当代艺术的雕塑品。
Next slide, please. Another artist is Rodel Tapaya.
另外一位艺术家叫做塔卡亚，
who uses images from various epics and folk tales.
他使用民间故事以及神话的形象，
and puts them under the current situation.
把它重新放在当代的情境里面。
Next slide, please. Next slide. So he will be able to create narratives that talk about current current realities.
所以他用他的作品来说故事，讲关于当代社会的故事。
Even though his images are from the past.
即使他作品的图像是挪用自过去。
Next slide, please. Next slide. Art as political, so we'll talk about it as identity, as colonial experience and imperialism.
接下来是艺术与政治，会谈论自我认同、殖民经验以及帝国主义。
Okay, many artists like Kawayan de Guia juxtapose indigenous imagery with colonial imagery.
艺术家卡瓦亮和其他的艺术家，他们把原住民的图像和当历史里面的图像以及帝国主义的图像混合在一件作品上。
And they talk about our experience of being a colony.
他们谈论作为一个殖民地的经验。
And even of modern day imperialism.
以及帝国主义。
Earlier than him, next slide please. Okay. Next slide. Okay, next one. Earlier than him was Santi Bose.
在他之前有这位艺术家 Bose，
who did the same thing in the 80s and the 90s.
他在18和19，他在1980年到1990年代也是用这样的方式来创作艺术。
Next slide. Next slide. By using, for example, images from the American colonial period, like our National Museum.
他的作品使用了美国殖民时期的建筑物，例如我们的国家美术馆。
And juxtaposing them with pictures from other times.
并且拼合了其他时代的图像。
He talks about U.S. presence in the Philippines.
主要是要表达美国对菲律宾的影响到现在仍然存在。
Next. Then Benedicto Cabrera.
接下来是艺术家 Cabrera.
One of our national artists.
也是我们国家级的艺术家。
Also uses this technique of appropriation.
一样使用挪用这个技巧。
But talks about more of social inequality.
它主要谈论的是社会的不公不义的事件。
Within Filipino society.
在菲律宾的社会里面。
This artwork is by Renato Habulan.
这件作品是来自哈布兰。
He uses art to protest. He started in the 1970s.
这件作品是在1970年代创作。他的作品主要是用艺术来作为抗议的工具。
He uses religious imagery.
他使用宗教的图像。
Next slide, please. For example, this painting with the dead Christ.
这件作品的上方是死去的耶稣。
Surrounded by people from lower income brackets.
下面的群众，他们主要是受到不公义对待的群众。
Like farmers and workers.
像是劳工或是农人。
Who have been denied justice.
他们通常都没办法取得自己的权益。
Next slide, please. We also have artists like Agnes Arellano.
我们也有阿雷拉诺这一类的艺术家。
Who use religious images against images of violence.
他使用宗教的图像和暴力结合。
Next slide, please. Or artists like Irida Lena.
还有艺术家达莲娜。
Who use archival photos.
他使用真实的抗议照片。
And then create installations to talk about current realities.
他创造了这类型的雕塑作品，来告诉装置作品，来告诉大家社会仍然存在许多问题。
Other ways of appropriation are using words.
另外一种挪用是使用文字。
And juxtaposing them with popular images.
使用文字和流行的图像表达。
Wire Quason uses this technique.
发展他就是主要擅长使用这个技巧的艺术家。
So that people can make their own meaning.
因此，观众可以借由观看这类型的艺术品，产生自己的解释。
Other use archival images for different purposes.
另外的艺术家，他们也会使用真实的档案的照片。
Lyle Camino, for example, uses archival photos taken from old Filipino movies.
像这位艺术家，他就使用菲律宾老电影的照片。
He paints a lot of the violent scenes. Sorry. Yes.
他也画了很多暴力的场景。
And puts humor into them.
但也添加了幽默这个元素。
And then focuses on how the painting is situated within the house or the museum.
这件作品的场景除了居家以及还有博物馆。
To critique how violence is entrenched in our society.
主要想要探讨暴力是如何广泛的存在我们的社会中。
Manuel Ocampo does the same.
Ocampo 他也使用同样的方式。
But uses more Western imagery.
但它主要使用西方的图像。
Next slide. Next slide. Okay, this is another artist. His name is Alvin Remilio. He uses popular images from the 80s and 90s to talk about political realities now.
这位艺术家 Rio Milo 是80到90年代活跃的艺术家，他的作品是结合流行图像。
Okay, next slide. Another approach that is common to contemporary artists is patterns and repetitions.
另外一种当代艺术的创作方法是重复与规律的图像。
Patterns are very pleasing to the eye.
因为规律的图像，我们人的眼睛非常容易的辨识。
Barikito uses patterns from Japanese textile, for example.
Barikito 这位艺术家，他的作品就结合了日本的图像，
to show us beautiful things.
展现美丽的一面。
But then talks about violence and how, because we are so accustomed to it, we cannot see it anymore.
他使用美丽来凸显暴力，因为他把暴力已经融合在画面里面。
Or even think of it as beautiful.
那由于现在当代人已经把暴力当为已经非常的习惯，所以我们比较难从画面中辨识。
Next slide, please. Okay, collecting can create patterns. Next slide.
另外一个是从收藏品当中创作出一种规律。
This artwork by the husband and wife team, Isabel and Alfredo Aquilisan,
这件作品是阿奎丽桑夫妇的作品。
are made from discarded flip-flops found in beaches.
他们到海边去捡拾丢弃的夹脚拖鞋。
By repeating patterns and creating wings out of the flip-flops,
他把这些夹脚拖收集起来之后，创造成翅膀。
they bring our attention to environmental pollution.
主要想要向社会大众凸显环境这个议题。
Next slide, please. By creating patterns from tourist paintings,
他们也使用和旅游业纪念品这类相关的图像，
which are regularly not thought of as art,
通常这类作品不被认为是艺术品。
they put this non-art into the art scene.
他们把这些非艺术放到了美术馆这个场所里面，
And question what is contemporary art.
主要是想要挑战当代艺术是什么。
Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This work is by Marietta Niguchi, who has been nominated recently for another award. Who won?
这类作品是塔尼乌奇的作品，最近他赢得了古根汉美术馆颁发的雨果国斯奖。
By creating endless breaks of gray and black, she's able to create artworks like a meditation.
他的作品使用了黑白灰3个颜色的方块，借由不断重复的绘画，创造出一种接近冥想的状态。
By focusing on details, She brings our attention to things that we normally do not notice.
他的另外一个创作的方式是把某部分的细节放大，他希望带领观众重新体验在生活当中习以为常的事物。
For example, this jeepney.
举例来说，这是菲律宾最常见的交通工具吉普尼，
Which is a very ordinary vehicle.
这是生活中的大众交通工具。
She makes a video and presents it as high-end vehicle.
他把平凡的吉普尼用一种高级轿车的方式来表现，
And brings a lot of questions on what is art.
因此也表现出他对艺术的提问：什么是艺术？
This work is by Pasita Abad.
这件作品是
Pasita Abad.
巴西大白的作品，
Yeah. She uses a lot of color and patterns.
它使用很多颜色和规律的图像。
She also uses thread and buttons and sewing in her art.
他也使用丝线，把丝与线缝入他的作品里。
Next slide. By doing so, she creates artworks that talk about herself.
因此，这件作品也体现了她女性的特质，
Her subconscious desire,
还有她潜意识里的欲望，
her art as a woman,
以及女性这个角色，
and our assumptions
以及她对于艺术的各种想象。
about all of this. Next slide. So another way that contemporary Philippine artists are making art is through appropriating common things.
另外一种菲律宾的当代艺术是挪用常见的图像。
This is a work by Louis Cordero. It's a video game machine.
这是 Curator 的作品，这比较像是我们台湾常见的卡拉 OK 机。
You see, a lot of Filipinos like to sing.
很多菲律宾大部分的民众都喜欢唱歌，
And they love to do it when they are getting drunk.
尤其是当他们喝醉酒的时候，特别喜欢唱歌。
One very famous song that many people sing is My Way.
有一首特别知名的歌曲叫做《My Way》，
A lot of people got killed because of this song.
很多人因为这首歌而丧命。
When two drunk men sing the same song and try to outdo each other, it ends up in violence.
当两个喝醉酒的人尝试要唱得比对方好，从竞争也变成追打。
Next slide, please. Making it his inspiration for art.
另外，我们会用艺术做各种实验。
This is work by Leroy New.
这是 Library 艺术家的作品。
He uses a lot of ordinary common materials like wire and piping and straw.
他使用常见的素材，例如塑胶管、金属线和吸管，
To create impressive public sculptures
去创作我们常见的流行的文化图像，
or even wearable art.
或者是可以穿的艺术品。
Next slide, please. This is a work by Ong.
这是艺术家欧的作品，
She uses the common technique of crochet
他使用编织的方式来创作，
to create sculptures
创作雕塑。
as well as dresses.
另外，也结合了信仰这个仪式。
Which she uses for performances.
这件作品展出的同时，也会结合行为表演。
The performance is like a prayer.
表演者会像是祈祷的人。
Her performing it with the public is the art.
他所表现的都是关于艺术。
And the sculptures are just byproducts.
这件雕塑品它比较像是商品的性质。
A lot of countries have paper cutting as an art form.
另外一种表现的方式是剪纸。
Ryan Villamael uses it to create contemporary art.
伊朗没有就用剪纸这个技巧创作当代艺术。
Okay, next slide please. MMU goes around the city
MMU 的作品就是使用这些收集起来的物件，
to look for beautiful things that are common.
去寻找 找艺术里面，
She tries to showcase what is common in everyday.
他想要去寻找艺术里面的日常性。
Next slide, please. Anton del Castillo uses toy soldiers.
这个艺术家他使用的是玩具士兵。
Here you see the toy soldiers forming an empty space of a white rose.
各位看到画面里面是透过小小的玩具士兵来创造出玫瑰花的形状。
We begin to question whether it is to mourn the loss of the soldiers,
这也表现艺术家对死去士兵的哀悼。
or is violence necessary for peace?
他也询问是否暴力是和平所必须的。
Next slide, please. Sometimes it is personal. For example, next slide, please.
有些艺术它也是检验个人的生活经验。
Marina Cruz has a lot of works that are inspired by her childhood memories.
Cruz 这位艺术家的作品，很多的灵感都来自于他童年的记忆。
Next slide, please. Next slide. Sometimes it is an intervention or a practice.
有的时候，艺术家会特别创作一件作品来表达某个目的。
Linky Suming Remilo got pencils from public schools.
这位艺术家他从公立学校收集出孩童不要的旧铅笔。
The students were so poor that they could not buy pencils for themselves.
因为有一个现象，是贫穷的学童常常他们没有钱买新的铅笔。
Her artwork was to exchange brand new pencils for old pencils like this
他收集了孩童不要的铅笔，去换新的铅笔，
and create sculptures out of them.
并且把它做成雕塑作品。
Next slide. Martha Chansa is from Cebu.
这艺术家来自宿务，
She went on a ship for more than 2 months.
他搭了船在海上航行了数个月。
She videotaped the sea from the ship
他使用录像记录了船上的所见所闻，
and studied the lives of Filipino sailors going out from Philippines to other countries.
尝试去记录菲律宾的水手。
In this way, the art becomes social commentary and social investigation.
从这个角度来看，艺术创作也成为了一种社会记录、社会实验的过程。
Next slide, please. Okay. Sorry. Oh, next slide, please. Next slide. Sometimes the city is the inspiration.
有的时候，马尼拉这个城市也会是艺术家的灵感的来源。
This is a part of a series of works by Goldie Poblador.
这个作品是一整个系列的一小部分。
She tried to create sense of the city, how the city smells.
他使用了小瓶子去装取这个城市各个角落的气味，
and bottled them in hand-blown glasses.
想要了解城市的气味为何。
Next. This is a work by Poklok Anadi.
这是艺术家安纳丁的作品。
He goes around the city photographing people,
他到城市各个地方拍摄平常人，
but he's asking them to use mirrors to mirror the sun when he photographs them.
当他拍摄路人的时候，他邀请这些人手持着镜子反射太阳光。
Their faces are blurred, but their form remains.
他们的灯光挡住了人脸，但是他们的形象却留下来了。
Next slide, please. Sometimes contemporary talks about art history itself. So this work by Mark Gaba
当代艺术有时候会和艺术史做连接。
tries to reimagine what painting is.
这位艺术家他想要挑战当代艺术的定义以及绘画。
He layers 3 paintings and cuts through them.
他把3个绘画重叠在一起。
Is it a sculpture or a painting?
如此一来，它究竟是绘画还是雕塑呢？
Sometimes art is the subject of art itself.
有时候，艺术品本身它就是艺术的定义。
Okay, there are so many forms of contemporary art.
菲律宾当代艺术涵盖多种形式，
Identity,
自我认同、
colonial experience,
殖民经验、
memory,
记忆、
hope.
希 希望。
our various impulses that create art.
各种不同的经验造就了现在的当代艺术。
We have a very limited art, how to say, time. So we could only talk about just a preview of what we have.
菲律宾当代艺术的历史还不够长，因此我只能提供给各位一小部分。
I hope there's enough for you to see for now.
希望这些的资讯，足够，各位觉得足够了。
Thank you.